Yoda's species is one of the greatest mysteries in all of Star Wars lore. George Lucas created Yoda to embody the enigma of the Force. He spoke strangely, contained great powers, and had no history beyond what affiliated him with the Jedi. And ever since his creation, Lucas has forbidden any exploration into much of Yoda's past and his species as a whole. This leaves us with many pieces but no complete picture on who and what Yoda's species is. Since then, several more members of his species have popped up here and there throughout the Star Wars timeline, and we can't help but wonder what the lives of each one says about their species as a whole. This leaves us with many pieces but no complete picture. Could we gain more insight into the truth by analyzing each of them? Greetings lore junkies and acolytes, and come along with us today as we attempt to examine one of the greatest mysteries of the entire galaxy, Yoda's species. Before we get into each individual member of Yoda's species, we wanted to first discuss what little we know about them. Yoda himself is quite guarded about his people and especially his home planet. He's never divulged where they come from, and neither has any other members of his species who's ever been a part of the Jedi. It seems to be a collective decision that their race has to remain a total secret to everyone, even the Jedi Order. Having said that though, their species seems intrinsically tied to the Jedi as well. Each member that we know of has been trained as one, and they all seem to be exclusively devoted to the light side and the Jedi way. Except one, of course, and that is Grogu, who is too young and too emotionally connected to Din Djarin. Because of this, we have a theory that we want to discuss. Some species exist in the galaxy with a born affinity to one side of the Force or the other. The Dathomirians lean more towards the dark, whereas beings like the Ithorians or the Kaldor lean more towards the light. But long ago, the Sith purebloods of Korriban were all born with a natural proclivity to the dark side. In some ways, one may even say that they were the chosen representatives of the dark side of the time. We have toyed with the idea before that Yoda's species could be the same thing, but for the light. The two species share many things in common actually. They are both exceptionally long-lived. Every member of their species is naturally Force sensitive, at least as we're aware, and from the very fibers of their being, they exude a predisposition to one side of the Force. But just as the Sith are the champions of the dark side, Yoda's species could be the prophets of the light. This is why we believe that they all have an immediate connection to the Jedi, but because they all know the dangers of what being a Jedi brings, they keep the location of their people a secret. Possibly also because their people are primitive, a peace-loving species that desires to remain hidden from the wider conflicts of the galaxy. If I had to guess, I believe that their planet either lies somewhere in the unknown regions, or in an undiscovered world in the deep core. This would explain why so few of them are in the galaxy, as hyperspace anomalies cause travel to and from the unknown regions and deep core to be very treacherous. But moving on, the amount of theories regarding Yoda's species is absolutely staggering. We would be here all day long if we tried to discuss each and every one of them. The name of Yoda's species is also hotly debated. Once again, Yoda is silent on the matter on even what he's called. Out of universe, this was because George Lucas wanted to keep an air of mystery around him. But also, Lucas once had the idea that Yoda was an entirely unique being, possibly the only one of his kind. In universe, many have mistaken exactly what Yoda is. An example of this is a Republic file even misidentified him as a Lanik, which is the race of Master Evan Piel. Many beings have chosen to refer to Yoda's species as a tridactyl because of their 3 fingers and their 3 toes. This is of course an entirely unofficial name though. However, for the purposes of this video, we're going to adopt that name if not for any other reason than not to be constantly repeating Yoda's species again and again. So, the tridactyls it is. The tridactyls appear to be of amphibian descent, and show an affinity for trees and swampier environments. Grogu shows that they may actually be carnivorous to begin with. He himself likes eating raw eggs and small creatures whole. It's possible that tridactyls train themselves to be omnivorous in order to exist in the wider galaxy though. However, their taste is very odd. Yoda, most notably, ate very strange dishes in the Jedi Temple's mess hall. He would eat bowls of some sort of sustenance that no one could quite figure out what exactly it was. At one point, a Temple service droid attempted to take Yoda's meal away from him because he could not identify it as food. On Dagobah, Yoda returned to his more carnivorous roots though, hunting other creatures. However, he refused to use his lightsaber to do so, believing that it was undignified for such a Jedi weapon. Soon enough though, his age kept him from being able to hunt at all, so he took to foraging for fungus and roots, usually making his root leaf stew as his staple meal. As far as their society and their culture goes, we basically have nothing to go off of. Strangely, there are no records or stories of Yoda and Yaddle interacting in any other setting besides in High Council meetings, unless they spoke privately. Then it almost seems as though they expressly avoided one-on-one conversations with each other. In fact, it seems they hardly know one another at all, as when either of them speak of the other, they do so very impersonally. In Yaddle's comic, The One Below, Yoda even opposes her rejoining the Jedi Order, or even being admitted to the High Council. And once a student by the name of Sipa Tarko asked Yaddle if Yoda was her brother, and she simply responded with this: "Hush, child, he is not. He is Master Yoda, a great teacher." What we can infer from this is that Yoda's species do not show favor to one another simply because they are of the same flesh. They judge based on merit alone and identify only as Jedi, not as beings of the same species. This falls deeply in line with Yoda's character actually, as he has a connection to the Jedi Order. In the novel Yoda Dark Rendezvous and in Clone Wars Season 6, it is shown that Yoda sees the whole Jedi as his family and as his children. He can see all beings around him through the Force, not as their physical race. This was the instruction that he gave to Luke when he said this: "Luminous beings are we, not this crude matter." So perhaps this is a racial trait that Tridactyls are so in tune with the Force that they only see through its lens. But the only image we've ever seen that reveals Yoda's society is a trading card that Lucasfilm has suppressed. The Star Wars Galaxy's trading cards almost released one that had art of several members of Yoda's species gathered around an idol which depicted their race. A monk or a priest was in the center holding a staff and levitating with the Force. The other 6 members present have their hands outstretched in worship, or are holding burning incense plates. This trading card was never released, as it showed too much of Yoda's species that was never meant to be seen. It's currently unknown whether this can be considered canon, or Legends continuity, or no continuity at all. And finally, there is the matter of their speech. Yoda speaks in a strange dialect where he will sometimes place the predicate before the subject. This speech quirk was originally identified as a trait that all members of his species shared. In early Legends content, Yaddle speaks the same way, as does the Jedi Knight by the name of Minch. However, neither of the 2 earliest members of their species, Vandar Tokare and Oteg, spoke this way. They spoke in regular basic, without changing their sentence structure at all. And in canon, Yaddle also speaks plain basic. Grogu has yet to audibly speak at all, so we don't know if this speech quirk is innate or learned. There are many theories as to why Yoda speaks this way though. Popularly, and most believe, that this is the dialect of the Tridactyl language and how it translates directly to basic. But none of the other members seem to have an issue with this. And since Yoda is almost 900 years old, he shouldn't either. We, though, have a theory that his dialect reflects his views on the Force. With the action portion of his sentence being said first, the verb is given priority over the subject. This could indicate that Yoda is trying to emphasize action and doing. His mantra is do or do not, there is no try. So placing the action of his sentence first, it immediately establishes in the mind of his students what needs to be done, or is being done. So this could be a teaching method uniquely developed by Yoda and adopted by others. But anyway, linguistic tangent aside, let's actually begin talking about all of the members of Yoda's species and what we know concrete. The first Tridactyl appears in the timeline as Master Vandar Tokare, who was a part of the High Council during the era of Revan. Vandar immediately separates himself from the other members of the species as the only one to express a surname. He also has more olive-toned skin instead of the typical green. Master Vandar's exact age is unknown, but we do know that he was brought up in the Order when the Jedi was still located on the world of Ossus. This means that he would have remembered the Great Library, studied there, and watched it fall under Exar Kun. He likely also participated in the Great Sith War. The earliest records of his actions were 4225 BBY, where he was already a Jedi Master who had 2 apprentices. The 3 took on a mission to the world of Caecilius, where they led Republic troopers in a campaign to retake the system from criminal overlords. The event was known as the Caecili Reconquista, and in it, Vandar led attacks on the most criminally infested cities and managed to detangle their syndicates. Within 3 months, the world was purified and once again safe to inhabit. At some point after this, he ascended to a seat on the Jedi High Council and was made at the head of the Dantooine Enclave. This was apparently how he survived the destruction of Ossus at the hands of Exar. His enclave became a new home base for the Jedi following their home planet's decimation. and there, Vandar would rebuild the High Council. However, in this time, there did not seem to be a Grandmaster. Instead, the council was led by 3 senior members, Vandar himself, his friend Rook Lamar, and Jedi Dorak. Vandar and Lamar were known to frequently argue, as Rook Lamar was very critical and skeptical, whereas Vandar was much more understanding and willing to listen. Tokair was in fact the most agreeable member of the High Council. He gave careful thought to all situations and was wise in his approaches. His willingness to hear people out was instrumental to the success of several situations. When the Jedi Lucian Dre and the Masters of the Covenant all killed their Padawans, they blamed it squarely on the Jedi Padawan Zane Carrick, who had managed to escape. Zane had actually been Vandar Tokair's student before he went to train with Lucian, and although Vandar at first believed that he was guilty, he had a sense that something was deeply wrong. Lucian Dre manipulated his way to a seat on the High Council as well, and Vandar allowed it to happen only so that he could keep a closer eye on him. Meanwhile, he went around uncovering the truth about how much influence Lucian actually had, not just within their sector of space, but within the Jedi Order. And Vandar was the first to accept that Zane was innocent, and work to have his name completely cleared. But what he is often remembered for in history was his remarkable power in foresight. Though the future is always in motion, Tokair excelled at reading the flow of time with near certainty. Soon the council came to rely on his future sight for many of their decision makings, which ended up becoming an ultimate detriment to them. Vandar had a premonition that destruction would befall the galaxy in the coming Jedi Civil War. Sadly, the warnings that he gave his fellow masters were misinterpreted. The council believed that he was warning them against engaging with the Mandalorians, who were the present threat in the galaxy. Their actions actually caused Revan to be galvanized against Mandalore the Ultimate, which led to his and Malik's fall and embrace of the dark side. The 2 Jedi waged the Jedi Civil War until Darth Revan was captured by Bastila Shan once he was betrayed by Malik. Bastila would bring Revan before the council, and they all combined their powers to completely wipe his memory in an effort to return him to the light forcefully. Vandar would advocate for the amnesiac Revan to be reintegrated into the Jedi. He was also the first of the council to sense that Revan and Bastila had a connection, one that would ultimately save the galaxy. Following this, he narrowly escaped Darth Malik's orbital bombardment of Dantooine, and he went on to fight in the Battle of Rakata Prime, where he directed the Republic naval forces. But after Darth Malik was defeated, things would go downhill. 50 years of betrayals, defections, and death had dwindled both the numbers and the spirits of the Jedi. The Sith returned from the shadows, forming the Sith Triumvirate consisting of Nihilus, Sion, and Traya. Their divide and conquer tactic sees them striking the Jedi from the shadows, bringing them towards complete annihilation. Master Atris in this time, in an effort to locate and draw their attackers out of hiding, summoned all of the Jedi to the planet of Qatar under the guise of a secret meeting. Master Vandar Tokare was among these Jedi, and just like the rest, he was completely helpless when Darth Nihilus arrived and consumed all life on the surface of the world. Perhaps Tokair's premonitions failed him, or perhaps his instincts led him to becoming one with the Force. But perhaps if he had been able to fight, he wouldn't have gone down so easily at all. Though largely known for his wisdom, Tokair was a terrifying fighter. He dual-wielded Shoto lightsabers, and like many others of his species, preferred Ataru as his chosen lightsaber form. However, his mastery of the Force enabled him to wield both of his lightsabers telekinetically, a feat that very few have managed to achieve in lore. But the true awe-striking power comes from Tokair's repertoire of esoteric and strange powers. Vandar was skilled with Force healing and Tutaminis, but he could also affect his opponents in very strange ways. He could slow someone down as if they were moving through water. He could suppress or even outright sever another being's connection to the Force. And he could even amplify potency of his own abilities to be more devastating at close range, or affect others at long distances. Vandar Tokare was no joke, and he set the standard for what we come to expect from Yoda's species moving forward in the timeline. The next Tridactyl we know of is much less impressive than Vandar, only because we never see nor hear of any of his battlefield feats. His name was Oteg, and he joined the Jedi Order 100 years after Vandar's death. His most prominent time, though, was the role that he served in the Great Galactic War and the cold year of 3653 BBY. Oteg served aboard the starship known as the Serapin Wanderer, assuming the role of captain after a heroic act of leadership. This happened when the resurgent Sith Empire attacked his fleet and killed the ship's captain. Oteg quickly assumed command and drove the Imperial fleet into a nearby nebula. He then tricked them into detonating the volatile space gases of the nebula, successfully destroying their fleet with only one ship and his own wit. Following the Treaty of Coruscant and Malgus sacking the Jedi Temple, this started the Cold War, and Oteg was elected to be a member of the High Council. As the years went on, the unsustainable peace treaty began to slowly fracture. Oteg was given the position of Fleet Admiral by the Supreme Chancellor, and at some point following this, Oteg would be contacted by the Force Ghost of the Jedi Mitra Surik. Mitra informed him of a powerful prisoner being held by the Sith Empire. Oteg in response would summon a 4-man strike team and directed an operation to liberate the Jedi Master, who was later revealed to be Revan, who had been held captive by the Sith Emperor for nearly 300 years. Once they obtained the means by which to free Revan, Oteg led the Republic fleet into an engagement with the Sith Imperial fleet that was protecting the prison. He used his ingenuity yet again to keep the Imperial fleet occupied, while simultaneously directing the team through the prison's facility. Once they freed Revan, Oteg welcomed him aboard the flagship called the Telos, and for a while, Oteg would house the reborn Revan as he slowly regained his bearings back from being imprisoned for 3 centuries. We don't really hear anything about Oteg after this, unfortunately, so we can only assume that he went on to bravely fight against the Sith just like every other Jedi of the era. Besides his mission to rescue Revan, he's one of the more unremarkable members of Yoda's species, but he's still worth mentioning since his kind is so extremely rare. The next entry is a member of Yoda's species that we've never seen anyone talk about before. This is potentially the 7th member of the Tridactyl race ever known to the galaxy, and he goes by nearly entirely unnoticed. This is because we have no documentation of him at all. He has no name, he has no combat stories, and no mention from the era of which he's a part of. All we have of him is a giant carved statue which lies in the Valley of the Jedi on Ruusan. The Valley of the Jedi is our only clue, and is a very important historical location though. In the year 1000 BBY, Darth Bane manipulated the Brotherhood of Darkness into conducting the Thought Bomb ritual. He had created the weapon so as to deceive his fellow Sith into believing that it would wipe out all of the Jedi, but in reality, it would consume them as well, destroying the Sith Order so that it could be remade into the Rule of Two. General Hoth led 99 Jedi into the caves of Ruusan to stop this ritual, but when they encountered the Sith, Lord Khan detonated the thought bomb early. The explosion vaporized all who were present and totally devastated Ruusan's environment. The souls and essence of all of the Jedi and Sith present there were drawn into a floating iridescent orb, where all of their souls remained trapped for centuries. This area became a powerful Force nexus and was named the Valley of the Jedi. A young Jedi by the name of Johann Othone, who was one of Hoth's former Padawans, went against the will of the High Council to build monuments to the heroes of the Light and Darkness War. There in the valley, he erected large statues that had busts of the Jedi who had sacrificed themselves, and among the very largest of these was the clearly depicted head of Yoda's species. This is notable because by this point, Oteg had been dead for several millennia, long enough to where it would make little sense for him to be honored here, and this was well over 100 years prior to the birth of Yoda himself. So the only reason for there to be a prominent head of their species carved here was if a Tridactyl Jedi was a part of Hoth's Army of Light, and one of those that sacrificed their lives there to stop the Thought Bomb ritual. The next member of Yoda's species to mention is the Jedi Knight by the name of Minch. Our first and only story about Minch comes from the comic called Heart of Darkness, in Star Wars Tales number 16. This takes place in the year 700 BBY. Minch was apprenticed to a Zabrak Jedi Master by the name of Tidai, and the two were dispatched as a part of a Jedi strike team to hunt down the Dark Jedi of Bafash. A Dark Jedi Master and several of his apprentices had been cutting a swath of destruction through the slowest sector, but the strike team managed to track them to the Commerce Guild trading station. Within the quarters of the station, several of the Dark Jedi fell, and Minch cornered the last apprentice in a dark hallway. The two engaged in a fierce duel, one that Minch actually loses. Luckily for him though, his master and Jedi compatriots arrived to his aid. The Dark Apprentice, now outnumbered, proclaimed that the end of the Jedi Order was nigh, and upon saying this, he uses his lightsaber to commit a seppuku, dying on the spot. Just then, Jedi intelligence detected a ship having launched from one of the station's docking bays. Undoubtedly, this was the Dark Jedi Master making a break for it. The Jedi chased him down to the world of Dagobah using their starships. However, they hesitated to land, fearing it would be too dangerous to attempt a landing in a small starfighter. Minch, however, was displeased by the loss to the Dark Apprentice. Disobeying his master's direct order, the young Tridactyl races down to Dagobah alone. In a scene that would be mirrored by Luke crashing later, Minch also finds his ship buried deep in the swamp. Once again disobeying his master's orders to stay put, he chases the Dark Jedi through the swamp, ending up in an overgrown dark cave. The young Tridactyl challenges the master, but the Dark Jedi uses his powers in the dark side to conjure terrifying illusions that overwhelm the young Jedi. The entire time, the Dark Jedi taunts him about his anger, his impatience, and teases him about his small size. Giving to panic, Minch rapidly slashes with his lightsaber and actually manages a lethal blow on the Dark Jedi Master. As he lays dying, the Dark Jedi declares that Minch's mind is weak, that it is open to anger, and that one day he will make a fine addition to the dark side. The Bafashi breathes his last, and when this happens, his wicked essence forever taints the dark cave, turning it into a dark side nexus. The same nexus that Yoda would later use to cloud his own presence in the Force from the watching eyes of Sidious and Vader. Although he won the battle, young Minch knew that he had been defeated in the spirit. His anger and impatience had conquered him, and he slew another being out of emotion. Minch walked away from the Cave of Evil with his head hung low, ready to be extracted by the Jedi Strike Team. This is unfortunately the very last time we ever hear a mention of Minch. And if we had to take a guess, the young knight feared the words of the Bafashi Jedi and worried about embracing the dark side one day, so we believe that he may have abandoned the Jedi out of penance before this could ever happen. Again, this isn't confirmed, it's only our theory. Given that Yoda himself was born in the year 896 BBY, the two actually would have known one another. Because of several coincidences, we were once convinced that Minch and Yoda may be the same person. However, our theory was absolutely blown out of the water because Yoda achieved the rank of Jedi Master at the age of 96 in the year 800 BBY. This was exactly 100 years before the story of Minch, who is expressly stated as a Jedi Knight. Also, his speech pattern is the same as Yoda's, so since no Tridactyl before Yoda spoke with this unique dialect, this lends credence to our theory that they voluntarily adopted his manner of speaking, modeling it after the way Yoda himself spoke. But in his lifetime, Yoda knew another one of his species, Yaddle, so far the only female of their kind that we have ever met. Yaddle achieved a full lifespan of 483 years old in Legends and 477 in canon. Her origins are told to us in the comic titled Yaddle's Tale, the one below, in Star Wars Tales number 5. Around 300 BBY, Yaddle would be apprenticed to a Jedi by the name of Polvin Kut. She and he were summoned to liberate the planet of Koba from a warlord by the name of Tulak. Her master had tried to organize a resistance, but was betrayed from the inside, leaving him and Yaddle to face the warlord's forces completely alone. What Yaddle only found out years later was that Tulak had killed Polvin's family a long time ago, and her Jedi Master harbored a deep-seated rage against the warlord. As the ambush commenced, Yaddle watched as her Jedi Master gave in to his dark emotions, charging head first, and ultimately dying in the battle, unable to let go of his pain. Yaddle was captured by Tulak and tortured for years in imprisonment, hoping to lure other Jedi to the planet, yet all attempts to break her out had failed. Tulak had Yaddle thrown into a pit where she was sealed away permanently. He did not execute her just in case she proved to be a useful hostage in the future. But eventually, he forgot all about her. During her centuries of isolation, Yaddle would relive what little lessons she had from her Jedi Master. She spent that entire time meditating on the Force, and soon went on an internal journey. Yaddle ultimately came to forgive her captors, and even Tulak, achieving unity with the Force. But soon the planet above all but forgot about her. Tulak had plundered the world of Koba so entirely that they barely had any food, and soon reverted back to a state of primitivism. Tales continue, however, about the one below, and a few superstitious villagers would occasionally lower provisions down into Yaddle's pit as a sort of sacrament. This would be her only source of nourishment beyond harnessing the living Force. While down below, Yaddle taught herself the art of combat, defending herself against predators and large beasts. Using only a wooden staff and the Force as her weapon, she became adept at combat out of survival necessity. Many decades would pass, and soon, tectonic shifts caused devastating earthquakes to the world. At long last, the pit opened and Yaddle was finally free. However, upon reaching the surface, she saw that the natives' entire way of life had come crashing down around them. What the years of famine and plague had not destroyed, the earthquakes had. Having compassion for the Kobans though, Yaddle willingly remained behind, using her powers to heal the people and to rebuild their society. Eventually, Evan PL discovered her existence and invited her back to Coruscant to finish her training as a Jedi. However, Yaddle declined, as she still wanted to lift up the Koban people. Eventually, Tulak's son would return to the world in order to claim his inheritance. The only one to defend the people was Yaddle herself. She entered a brief but a vicious duel with the warlord, kicking his own dagger into his neck. Yaddle had finished what her master had started, but did so without anger or aggression. Soon enough, Yaddle would return to the Jedi, and in the year 44 BBY, she was summoned to the High Council by Evan PL. Evan advocated for her in front of the entire council, believing that she should be given the rank of Jedi Master. It was Yoda, however, that was dubious. Given how she had been imprisoned and mistreated, Yoda did not fully trust that anger was banished from her heart. Yoda opposed her being elevated, especially because she had not finished her training officially yet. But PL was a vocal advocate for Yaddle, and with her permission, he went on an impassioned retelling of her story before the entire High Council. By the end of it, Yoda was convinced that she was not on the path to the dark side whatsoever, and although it was atypical, he approved of her being welcomed into the fold. Unanimously, the council lifted their lightsabers and awarded Yaddle the rank of Jedi Master, and a seat on the High Council. In Yaddle's time as a part of the Jedi, she trained many apprentices, such as Oppo Rancisis, Impadajoyous Brand, and she took part in many pivotal missions of the Republic Classic era. One event was the fight against the Nebula Front terrorist group, the Yanchori Uprising, and a political coup on Malastare, but her final mission in Legends takes place in 26 BBY. Here, Yaddle would go to the world of Mauen with Anakin Skywalker and Obi-Wan Kenobi. Their mission was simply to restore peace to the lawless world which was in the throes of chaos due to one man, Granta Omega, the son of Qui-Gon's rogue apprentice. He had planned to unleash a chemical bioweapon on Mauen in a plot of revenge against the Jedi, despite Anakin's best efforts to stop it. It was Yaddle that sacrificed herself to save the people, absorbing the bioweapon. It killed her instantly, but Yaddle managed to contain it so that it would not ravage the innocent people. In terms of Yaddle's rare powers, given that she had most of her training done away from the Jedi, she ended up mastering several lesser-known powers by experience alone. Most notably, she could use the ability of Force Light, the ability to summon a bright light to banish all traces of the dark side, visually and within individuals. She was also one of the only Jedi of her era to have access to this rare ability. Even Yoda was not said to be able to summon such power. She also mastered the ability known as Morchiro, the ability to slow the vitals of organic beings to put them in a comatose state. While she avoided combat whenever necessary, Yaddle's preferred lightsaber forms were Sarisu and Dataru, and in Legends, she was one of the few Jedi to wield an orange lightsaber. Yaddle is definitely one for the books, and we're definitely pleased that she got a spotlight in the canon Tales of the Jedi series. But now at last we arrive at the man himself, Jedi Grandmaster Yoda. As far as we know, Yoda is the one who retained the title of Jedi Grandmaster for the longest period of time. In fact, many associate him with the title whenever it's brought up. By the time he ascended to that rank though, Yoda was considered one of the greatest and most powerful Jedi in all of galactic history, equivalent to Jedi such as Master Thrawn and Nomi Sunrider. Because he's a premier character in the Star Wars galaxy, we're going to keep his story more of a summary. Like all others of his species, Yoda's origins are obscure, but we actually learned from the Yaddle comics a piece of Yoda's history that is not shared anywhere else. When Master Evan PL was sharing Yaddle's story, Yoda interrupted to say, "Hard was life in prison for young Yaddle. Disagree, I do not. But lessons from her Jedi Master were incomplete. Lived life in solitude she did." To which PL said, "As did you, Yoda. You yourself left your village family for a solitary existence. You became a hermit, even by Jedi standards." Yoda then dryly responds that his training was complete by that point, but that Yaddle's was not. Shockingly, this gives us a tiny window into Yoda's life. He had a family once, and lived in a village on whatever homeworld the Tridactyls hail from. But we know that he was traveling in a ship with a human companion when that ship was struck by an asteroid. They then crash-landed on a swampy world where they would meet the Hysilrian hermit by the name of Nakata Del Gormo. Del Gormo, who revealed that both of them had an affinity to touch the Force. The Jedi Master invited them to become his apprentices, to be trained in the ways of a Jedi. Once their training was complete, their distress beacon was picked up by a Republic starship, and the two individuals were rescued. Yoda decided to continue his service as a Jedi, likely inspired by other members of his species before him. And so he traveled to Coruscant, where he continued to study under Grandmaster Faye Kovan. By the age of 96, Yoda had become a Jedi Master, and soon joined the High Council. For the next several centuries, Yoda devoted himself to the training of many Padawans, one after another. Around 500 BBY, Yoda spent his time as a Jedi aboard the starship known as the Chuathor, which was a mobile Jedi academy that toured the galaxy with Jedi initiates. In 230 BBY, the ship crash-landed on Dathomir, where Yoda and his Jedi were forced to fight the native witches. However, the two groups ultimately came to a stalemate. Yoda conceded to their request that they leave the ship's data tapes. However, he left no means of reading the tapes, and they were bestowed to the Singing Mountain clan for safekeeping. Through the Force, Yoda foresaw a time when the Jedi would come to save the planet from darkness, and the information could be safely shared with the witches. The prophecy would be fulfilled by Luke Skywalker deep into the distant future. By 200 BBY, Yoda and several other Jedi Masters sensed that the shape of the Force had begun to flux, becoming murky and uncertain. The dark side of the Force was rising in response to the growing power of the Rule of Two, the Sith in hiding. Yoda therefore put forth the theory that the darkening of the Force may be hailing the imminent approach of the Chosen One. In opposition to the theory, several younger Jedi disputed Yoda's findings, forming a heretical sect known as Potentium. The followers of Potentium did not believe that there was a light or a dark side, but only the intentions of the user. By 130 BBY, Yoda would lead a campaign to expel them and their dangerous ideas from the Jedi Order. Around 102 BBY, a young Dooku was taken in from a wealthy family from the world of Sereno. And although Thame Cerulean was Dooku's official Jedi Master, Yoda took a particular interest in the young boy's training and became a deep confidant and advisor. Eventually, Dooku considered him to be his second Jedi Master. Within this time, he worked closely with Dooku's lightsaber training, bringing him to becoming an accomplished duelist in record time. Another Padawan of Yoda's famous lightsaber training was Sin Dralig, who would later go on to become the Battle Master at the Jedi Temple. Yoda's life allowed him to see the rise of the Jedi to a place of prominence and strength during a time of peace in the galaxy, one that they hadn't seen in ages. And he also lived long enough to see it crash and burn. His beloved student Dooku would fall to the dark side, becoming the Sith apprentice of Lord Sidious. And together, the two Sith waged the Clone Wars. Yoda used what resources he could fight back with in the growing darkness, all the while having more and more premonitions that the Jedi Order was about to fall, entering a twilight. Yoda started to recognize that the Jedi had become puffed up and arrogant, stuck in their ways because of all of their previous success and peacetime. It became apparent that their rigidity was going to be the Jedi's end. However, it was too late for Yoda to change things all by himself. He needed the help of the Chosen One. Perhaps it was Anakin, the Chosen One, to defeat the Sith and restore balance to the Force before the Jedi Order could be fixed. By the end of the Clone Wars, Yoda began hearing voices from the long-dead Jedi Master Qui-Gon Jinn, who had somehow retained his identity beyond death, a prospect which went against everything the Jedi thought they knew. The Council believed that it was a Sith trick, and kept Yoda on high watch. But the Jedi Grandmaster escaped from his own council, following the voice of Qui-Gon to the Wellspring of Life. The Wellspring of Life is the birthplace of the midichlorians, and there, the Grandmaster met 5 mysterious entities, beings calling themselves Force Priestesses, which would lead him through a training ritual where he would face his greatest fears. Yoda foresaw the end of the Jedi, the triumph of the Sith and Lord Sidious. But when he came out of this trance, he had taken his first steps into learning the ability that Qui-Gon had mastered, returning from death. Yoda kept all of this knowledge to himself, and continued to fight valiantly in the Clone Wars, hoping that he could see the signs in time to prevent the fall of the Jedi. However, he was blindsided by the fall of Anakin Skywalker and the sudden activation of Order 66. Yoda never imagined that the weapon of the Sith was the war itself, and when he went to duel Sidious that had eluded him the entire time, it was not a battle of lightsabers and force powers. It was all futile. The war for the Jedi had already been lost. All at once, Yoda realized the Sith had won before the war ever began. They had won before he was ever Grandmaster. Perhaps they had won before he was even born. The Sith won the moment they began the rule of two. With this realization, Yoda uses his many years and wisdom to realize that all hope was not lost though, that the Jedi would mirror the Sith, go into hiding and train the next generation to return and restore peace. Into exile Yoda went, venturing to the world of Dagobah that had been erased from the Republic and the Jedi's records. Yoda would utilize the Cave of Evil that had been created by the actions of one of his fellow Tridactyls, Minch. The dark side nexus was strong enough to hide Yoda's titanic presence in the light side, so that he would not be located by the Sith. And in this time, he came to accept the faults of the Jedi, and that he required more training under a new Jedi Master, Qui-Gon Jinn. For 20 years, Yoda eagerly awaited the day when the offspring of Anakin would arrive. He was hoping to train both twins, but received only Luke, who was too old for his liking and too impulsive, reminding him far too much of Anakin, and Yoda was ultimately reluctant to train the boy. But just like Qui-Gon, the ghostly voice of Obi-Wan interceded, and Yoda agreed to ready the son of Skywalker for his destiny. For a month, Yoda trained Luke in the ways of the Force, but when the young boy received a terrifying vision of his friend's suffering, he rushed off to Cloud City, ignoring the warnings of Yoda. The Grandmaster, however, held faith that either Luke would succeed, or that he could begin anew with Leia. A year would go by. Yoda would finally reach the very limits of what his species was capable of living, and apparently, that limit is 900. Yoda fell ill, and did not wish to continue using the light side to sustain his life. To cling on to life at this point would be selfish and un-Jedi-like. Yoda knew how to continue guiding Luke from beyond the grave anyhow, but he still waited for the young boy to keep his promise and to return to Dagobah. Eventually Luke did, returning as an experienced wielder of the Force. On Yoda's deathbed, he informed the boy that once he conquered Vader and the Emperor, that he would officially be a Jedi Knight. And with his final breath, he informed Luke that he was not alone, that there was another Skywalker, and thus perished the greatest member of the species of Yoda. However, Yoda was not the last. Just as Luke had another Skywalker, there was one more member of Yoda's species who exists in canon continuity, and that is Grogu. How the youngling came to be in the Jedi Order is a complete mystery. Some have speculated that he was the offspring of Yoda and Yaddle, but this is entirely unlikely. Not only did the two not appear to know each other very well, but it went against everything that they stood for as Jedi of this era. But somehow, in 41 BBY, Grogu was born and brought to be trained as a Jedi. From infancy, he was trained by many Jedi Masters, but was never able to reach completion in his training due to Order 66. As the clone troopers and Lord Vader stormed the temple, Grogu was rescued by Keller and Beck and hidden away. Years later, he was found by Nikto pirates aboard the Arvala 7. Discovered by Moff Gideon of the Imperial Remnant, Gideon hired the Mandalorian by the name of Din Djarin to retrieve the child. But upon seeing the helpless creature, the Mandalorian had a change of heart and decided to fight on its behalf, eventually adopting it into the Mandalorian creed and culture. Din Djarin would spend a great deal of time protecting the Jedi infant from the clutches of Moff Gideon, who wanted to use the child's blood as a means of cloning himself a Force-sensitive vessel. But eventually, Luke Skywalker would catch wind of Grogu's existence and would arrive to help. Luke stormed Gideon's flagship, tore through the experimental Dark Trooper droids, and rescued the Mandalorian strike team. Afterwards, he took Grogu in as his first student of a new Jedi Order, and began his training. Grogu stayed with Luke, and as his training progressed, Luke would impart on him more stories about Yoda, but it quickly became clear to him that Grogu had formed an attachment to Din Djarin. This attachment made it difficult for him to focus on training as a Jedi. Reluctantly, Luke sent the child back to the Mandalorian, and as of the writing of this video, the two remain a family. But although Grogu is still being trained as a Mandalorian foundling, there is no denying his powerful connection to the Force. It continues to call to him, and he soon must answer. His story is yet to be concluded. So, this is basically everything we know about the mysterious Yoda species, along with each individual member that has ever been shown or mentioned. They are some of the greatest natural wielders of the Force in the entire galaxy, and based on what we see here, there are a lot of theories and inferences that we can make about their society and their people, but what I appreciate most about them is that they are not perfect. While they are often the avatars of the light in their eras, they are not infallible. Even their greatest, Yoda, proves that they can have lapses in judgment. Vandar proves that they are not all-powerful. Minch proves that they are not incorruptible. And I think this makes them very special when they appear. They have the potential to be a powerful force for good, so long as they stay on the straight and narrow. This, I think, gives the story of Grogu and his journey some tension. We have already seen that his attachment to Din Djarin drives him to use powers that are both helpful and destructive. But anyway guys, I sincerely hope you enjoyed this video. But before we go, we have two things to ask you. First, do you like the Tridactyl as the unofficial species name? Or do you think that assigning them a name, even as a placeholder, ruins some of the mystery of Yoda's species? And second, which member of Yoda's species do you personally find to be the most compelling? To be more specific, which one do you wish could be explored in greater detail? Let us know your thoughts in the comments down below. But as always, thank you so much for visiting the archives here today, and may the Force be with you.